the more I get into my spiritual journey, the more tired I get of all the fear mongering that goes along with these presidential elections that come along every 4 years. I don't know if anybody else is like just at their wits' end like I am, but I am just so tired. And like the dreams that I keep having about these elections really just, I really, at this point, I can almost understand why the younger generation chooses not to vote, because they feel like their vote doesn't count. But I really feel like more of us, especially those in like the spiritual communities, and even if you're not in the spiritual communities, just those that want change, those that do aspire for the economy to change for the better, do need to actually actively get out there and vote. But it seems like the ones that truly want change are the ones who actually choose not to get involved, which is kind of why things have been run amok as they are, because as long as the ones who truly want to see things change for the better don't get involved, then the ones who just want things to continue as they are just pretty much get to do as they please. But the dreams that I've been having and like this whole Project 2025, like y'all, it really doesn't matter left wing, right wing, Democratic, Republican. It really doesn't matter. The whole system is corrupt, right? The whole system is corrupt. But it just really boggles my mind how every time the election comes up, you have all of this propaganda that is just being plastered all over the place. And like fear mongering is such a powerful tool. Like whether you choose to vote for Trump or Biden, and I do have my preference among the two that'll probably come out as I get into this dream that I'm about to talk about. But with things going the way that they are, I just know that this can't continue, right? But regardless of who your preference is in form of like which candidate, all of this propaganda it's getting such out of control. People have been posting all of this stuff about like Project 2025, and I tried to go to the website on my phone. I don't know if it's because it's on my phone that I'm not able to like really scroll through and read, but from what I can see, what they've posted about it on project2025.org, it just seems very, very, very vague. So when people are posting all of these things about, oh, they're going to cut, Republicans are going to cut this and they're going to cut that, where are y'all getting that from? Because I can't find any of that on the website. So I'm trying to figure out like where people are getting this from, that all of these benefits and things are going to be cut. And I know a big one people were talking about was like VA benefits and like what do you call that? Disability and things like that. And I'm like, if you've ever been in the military, worked for the Department of Defense as a civilian, or worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs, you would know that whenever Republicans are in office, they actually get raises. Whenever a Republican is voted into office, the government actually gets raises. So all of this about now they're going to be cutting all of these benefits, and they're going to be, getting rid of all these veterans benefits, it doesn't really make any sense. And like people, I'm like, where are y'all getting this from? And people are like screenshotting me these little, they're not even like actual articles. They're not even like actual bills. They're just screenshotting things that people have posted all over social media. And I'm like, well, obviously that's something that somebody created. Like, because if you've ever worked for the government, if you've ever seen an official government document, then you know that it's very detailed in how it's worded. The wording is almost done in a way to where the average person is not going to understand what this is talking about. Like the wording is just ridiculous. They're very long, very, very, very detailed. I'm like, these little poster board projects that people are putting together saying that they're getting rid of all and they're taking out tens of millions and this and that. I'm like, where are y'all getting this from? Because this is obviously not an official government document. And I'm like, y'all are posting all of this around because, I mean, like, we see who's ahead in the polls right now. And I feel like people are plastering this all over the place because it's just a way for people to push their candidate of preference, right? But, you know, like I said, regardless, like the dreams that I've been having, I don't know if I don't even know what I want to title this. If I'm going to title it Project 2025 Hunger Games, maybe I'll just title it Project Hunger Games 2025. I don't know. But I know I had a dream. I've had like a few dreams about the election. I remember telling my mom back in like 2022, back in like, well, the end of 2021, before like, you know, people started announcing who was going to be running for each party. And I remember telling my mom that Trump was going to be the Republican candidate. And my mom was like, oh, that's not going to happen. He still has to go to court. He has all of this and X, Y, Z. And I said, yeah, but if the court documents that they had against him were enough to actually were anything of any sort of credit or value, he wouldn't even be able to be a nominee. Like, let's keep it all the way 100. He wouldn't even be able to be a nominee. And I remember telling my mom, like, no, I had a dream. I said, when the final election comes down to it, it's going to be between Biden and Trump. And my mom was like, no, I don't believe that. They're going to pick somebody else. He has too much going on. And then, of course, here we are now, 2 years later. I remember when the primary, before we even had the primaries back in February, before everybody started like randomly dropping out, I told my mom, as candidates were dropping out left and right, I said, I'm telling you, it's going to be, I said, look at the Republican candidates. He is way ahead of everybody else. And then like now we're here with the election coming up in just a few months. And my mom was like, well, he's not going to win. He's not going to win. He's not going to win. And like that, you know, at this point goes without saying, you know, well, not goes without saying that at this point, we really don't know. This election is going to be very, very, very close. And even with all the fear mongering that's going on with this Project 2025, and people are like, oh, they're trying to get rid of all the benefits that help the poor, and they're trying to get rid of all the benefits that help the disabled, and they're trying to get rid of all the benefits that help the the veterans. And I'm like, yeah, but y'all know, like, we still have like Congress and things have to go through Congress. You know, it has to be voted. Like, just because they come up with a bill, it still has to go through the law process. So I'm like, even with that being said, I just don't see any of that actually being true. You know what I mean? And I'm just thinking, I'm like, you know, with all due respect, look at where our economy is nowadays. I mean, I was speaking with someone the other day, and just me, myself, and, you know, mentioning that I'm, you know, considering relocating now because the apartments that I live in got bought out by another company, by a bigger company, and they have jacked up the rent by like $300 a month. And I remember talking to someone about that, and they were like 300. They were like, I know someone who rents a home from, they rent a home from someone, and they were like, yeah, the person that I'm renting this home from jacked up my rent by $500 a month. And I'm like, where are the rules and the regulations that prevent people from doing that type of stuff? Like, every time you go to renew a lease or a rental agreement, it's typical that the rent will go up by about 25, 50. If you have someone who's a real a-hole, maybe even like $100, right? For the next one. But I've never in my life seen rental agreements jump up by hundreds of dollars. And it's like, you have done no repairs, you have made no improvements, you haven't even done any cosmetic work to even make it look nicer, but all of a sudden you want people to pay hundreds of dollars more. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, where is the cap on this? Where is the cap on this? I see so many, and I'm a millennial technically, although I more so relate to like Gen X, probably because my parents were military. So I spent a lot of time with my grandparents growing up, so I kind of relate a little bit more to that generation before Gen X, but that's neither here nor there at this point. Me being in my late 30s now, I've seen so many people my age who are like moving back in with parents, or people who are getting roommates like at this age. Like I'm like, and it's so funny because I went into the break room the other day and someone was watching Golden Girls, and I'm like, we are literally living in like a Golden Girl age, and we're not even like in our 40s, where I've seen people who are like literally full grown adults that are like having to get roommates because the rent is so out of control. Right? I've seen older people, so sweet, so sweet, at the grocery store, who were like, yeah, that they're looking for roommates, or they're like trying to rent out a room, because inflation, like they can't even afford to put food on their table. Like you're talking about, people taking away benefits. People can barely afford to put food on their table. I remember I went to the grocery store just today and I brought a fruit tray because I was just gonna go get fruits, but I didn't feel like cutting up the fruits myself, so I was being lazy. That's nobody's fault but my own. But I remember going to get a fruit tray, and the fruit trays used to be like $10. Now it's like $20 for a fruit tray that's literally gonna last you like 2 days, right? So I remember I got a fruit tray, and I got a couple of like the little salad kits, and I spent like $100. I bought like a couple other things, like some laundry detergent and some dish soap, but I spent like $100, and it was literally enough food that may last me like the next 2 or 3 days. And I was like, we have literally gotten to a point now where like fast food is cheaper. Y'all remember back in the day when they used to be like, when parents used to be like, we have McDonald's at home. Like anything you ask, Mom, can we get this? Or we have that at home. It is no longer cheaper to eat at home. It is now cheaper to like eat fast food, which of course is like detrimental to our health. We are killing ourselves with the things that we're eating, right? And now the food that you're spending all this money at the grocery store buying is not even real anymore. Like if I see one more person post a video about them getting home and their fruit being like rubber, it's ridiculous. Like the food that we are spending hundreds of dollars on is not even real anymore. So I'm like, really at this point, what are we even talking about? I had this dream, because I've been talking for forever, and I had this dream and it's so appropriate because all over YouTube, you see people making these clips, and they're posting, pictures of like, not pictures, videos of like celebrities at like the Met Gala and all of this stuff, wearing these really extravagant gowns, and they're playing that song in the background, Are You Coming to the Tree? And they're also posting videos of like other Americans who are like literally living on the street or like living in squalor, right? And it's like, it's so appropriate because I had this dream. Like I said, I had this dream a year ago, or it was either last year or it was back in 2022. Either way, I knew that Trump the final election was going to be between Trump and Biden, right? So it was before we had the primary elections. And I had this dream where like right before we were getting ready to vote in the actual election, I don't know, like the the final election, I guess I'll say, Biden ended up declaring war. Now in the dream, it showed me, I don't know if it was like the Middle East or something. It showed me who he declared war with, but I can't remember it now because like I said, I had this dream so long ago. But he ended up declaring war. And when he did it, it was more so meant to be a distraction. It was meant to be a distraction for him to have Americans thinking that he's on our side, that he has our safety and our best interests in mind. But really, it was like a scare tactic to keep people from like getting out to the polls and actually voting, right? But needless to say, like it didn't work. And it actually ended up backfiring. Like when I tell y'all this was like real life Hunger Games. Like in this dream, it was real life Hunger Games. Like we're sitting here, the economy is already like going down, and we're getting ready to vote, and this man declares war, and people had just had enough. Like that, the very last Hunger Game movies where like the citizens were all rallying up and everybody was fighting and they were like heading to the Capitol and all that stuff. This is like exactly how like that dream was, where everybody was heading toward President Biden, right? Like President Biden was President Snow for all, intents purposes, right? Everybody was heading towards him because people were like, no, like we see through it. We know what you're trying to do. And we're not with it anymore. And like I said, like, hopefully they'll post more information about this Project 2025 so that people can be more informed about what it is. But regardless, it still has to go through Congress. So I really don't want people being so afraid. Like, I don't want people going to the polls and letting this propaganda about Project 2025 to like sway people into voting for a candidate that's actually going to be even more destructive, right? So I just really want people to just stay informed, stay informed. And actually, as we get closer to the election, more people probably need to stay off of social media, right? But I just say that to say this, like, where this economy is heading, like we just can't continue going in this direction. Weird, like it's like I said, like when people keep posting the comparisons to where we are now to like the Hunger Game movies, it's just so appropriate because it really saddens me to see so many people who were doing just fine 4 years ago. And a lot of this did have to do with COVID. COVID did kind of change the construct of a lot. We did have some inflammation. We did have some inflation associated with COVID at the time where it was hard to get things transported. And it was hard to get things, to get goods and stuff to where they needed to be. But inflation has skyrocketed ever since like the whole pandemic. Like, of course, COVID is still out there. It's still circulating, but it's nowhere near like it was back in 2020. But the bigger portion of the inflation happened after the pandemic had subsided. Like the bigger portion of the inflation has happened within the past year, where literally things have gone up like 100%, Like I remember my coworkers used to make fun of me because they were like, oh, well, what's your favorite fast food restaurant? And I was like, Subway. And they were like, I'm not paying, because you used to be like a foot long for like $8.99. They were like, yeah, I'm not paying someone $8 to make me a sandwich that I can make at home. And I'm like, well, technically, if you think about it like that, you could go home and make your own cheeseburger as well. So, I mean, no matter what your stance is, anything fast food, you can make at home. You can make your own fries. You can make your own cheeseburger. Technically it's food. Any of it you can make at home yourself, But I remember my coworkers used to laugh at me because I used to tell them that my favorite fast food restaurant was Subway, right? But anyways, I remember going to Subway. I hadn't been in a while. I stopped going for a while because I was like, I'm going to start eating better. I'm going to start eating at home. And I remember going to Subway in January and getting the same thing that I always get, the same thing that I always get. And it ended up being like $20. And I was like, wait a minute. I said, what? Why? And she was like, yeah, our footlongs are like $15.99 now. Why? Well, the particular one that I got that used to be $8.99 is like $15.99 now. So I'm like, they've doubled in price. Like everything has doubled in price. Everything has gone up by 100% in inflation. And it's happened within the last year. Because I'm like, I just went to Subway maybe like before January, maybe like last September or something. And it was still like $8.99. Maybe like September, maybe like August. I don't know. But I know it was like sometime in the fall of 2023 that I went, only to come back in 2024 and it had doubled in price. I mean, I'm like, where we're going now, people are having a hard time, especially the younger generations that we keep. And the more I get online and see these advertisements when people are like, oh, let me show you how to get into like an Ivy League school. Let me show you what the Ivy League schools are looking at. Who in this day and age is still even considering going to an Ivy League school? Who at this day, like, I don't even care, Harvard, Brown, I don't even care. Who at this point is so, like, a degree is a degree. Like, I don't care if you go to Brown. I don't care if you go to Harvard. I don't care if you go to Penn State or if you go to Alabama State University. Why Alabama? I don't know. That's just the first thing that came to mind, probably because it starts with an A. Who cares at this point? A business degree is a business degree. Like, who at this point is still paying for names? Who at this point would even consider getting into $100,000+ worth of debt to go to an Ivy League school when you can go to your local university and get the exact same degree? Get the exact same degree for a fraction of the cost. Like, you have so many, like, they talk about how college enrollment has dropped. Yeah, because the price is ridiculous. The price of tuition is ridiculous. And a lot of parents are like, a lot of kids are like, they don't want to go to college anymore. They want to do something else. And a lot of parents are like, well, I'm just fine with that because I can't afford these new tuition rates anyways. Then you have like a lot of kids that did go, that are like still drowning in debt, trying to pay off these degrees because at this point, it's costing more to get the degree than what you're looking at making once you finish. Like, starting salary at some of these companies, entry-level salary at some of these companies is still between 30 to 40 to 50,000. But you want students to go to school to get this $60,000, $80,000 degree in order to get a job that's only going to pay them a fraction of what it costs them to get the degree. And even when they do that, the housing market, like, I can almost kick myself. I looked at buying a home, and there was this really, really, really nice home that I saw when I was looking at buying houses back in like 2015. That was like a 2-story, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. And it was really nice. And I remember the person selling it wanted like $135,000 for it. And at the time, I just didn't want to commit. When I looked at the paper and I was like, well, I'm only going to do like a 10 or 15 year loan. I'm going to go ahead and pay this thing off and like get it over with. And I remember just like not wanting to sign the paperwork because I did not want to commit, because I like to move around. I like to relocate. I don't like being in the same area, the same spot for too long. So I remember being like, I don't know if I want to commit. If I would have just went ahead and bought that house 10 years ago, I would have almost paid it off at this point. It would have been practically paid off by this point. And you can't even find a home for that price anymore. Like, the housing market has just completely gone out of control. And a lot of these younger generations, like even some of my coworkers, like the ones that are like freshly graduated that are starting in the field, are like, yeah, I still live at home with my parents, because they're like, my starting salary from what they pay us, and then rent, a 1-bedroom apartment in a decent area, a 1-bedroom apartment is going to cost you like $1,000 a month. And a lot of them are like, by the time I have to pay back my student loans, because that kicks in as soon as you graduate, by the time I have to, pay, bills and all this stuff, they're like, I trying to pay for food and then having to pay the benefits. The cost of benefits has increased, even the health, even though the job still pays a significant portion of our healthcare benefits, the out-of-pocket cost every year continues to go up. So many people are like, yeah, I can't afford to buy a home. A lot of, and then like, don't let you have children. Daycare. Oh my gosh. I was talking to my little brother, and he put my niece in daycare, and he was like the cheapest one he could find. Now, he lives down in Florida, granted. He lives down in Florida. Florida, their market's a little bit different. I told him he might want to get out of Florida because, right now, Florida is pretty expensive. But the cheapest daycare that he could find was like $225 a week. And I was like, my God. $225 a week. I mean, back in the day, that used to be rent. I mean, now with rent skyrocketing, that's not even rent anymore. But $225 a week, what's that? $225, that's like what, $450 times 2, that's $900 a month. That used to be rent. You used to could rent a 3-bedroom apartment for that kind of money. And now $900 a month is like standard for daycare. I have a coworker now who had a child a few years ago, and now her and her husband are expecting their second child. And she was like, she said, my first child is still in daycare. And she said, we're paying $1,000 a month for that child to go to daycare. And she was like, now when I have this one, she was like, at this point, instead of paying $2,000 a month for both kids to be in daycare, she said, I'm just going to drop down to PRN. She said, my husband, he's still going to work full time and keep his job. But she was like, once she has that baby, she's going to drop down to PRN, and she's only going to work on days that he's off so that she can stay home with the kids, because it just makes more sense that way. She was like, it just doesn't make sense for her entire paycheck, to go towards daycare. And I was like, and she's not even the first one that I've heard say that. I had a coworker a couple of years ago that left and went down to PRN because she had a baby, and they said daycare was so expensive, it didn't make sense for her to just work and give her entire paycheck to daycare. So things, the economy it can't keep continuing to go. Like, people can say whatever they want about Project 2025, and I'm not going to say much about it until I have more information on it, because I really don't want to speak on things that I don't know, right? So I'm not going to say much about it, but what I will say is that we've had who we've had in office from these past 4 years, and we see where that's gotten us. Like, honestly, we see where that has gotten us, and it's not really a pretty picture at this moment. So I just want people to continue, like, go. For some reason, I'm just like, if you got to go to your ancestors and ask your ancestors, do that. But just make sure that you're not basing your decision on the propaganda. Make sure you're not allowing fear mongering to tailor your decision and who you decide to vote for in this election. And despite what people tell you, I'm still going to encourage people to get out there and vote, because like I said in the beginning, the people who actually care and want to see change, we have to be the ones that are getting involved. Okay, we just have to be. So just like they told Katniss in the movies, right? When you go to the polls this year to vote, when you go to the election polls, remember who the real enemy is. Okay? Remember who the real enemy is. But y'all, that's going to be it for today. I really only intended for this to be a quick 10-minute video. And of course, I've gone way over that. So I'm going to go ahead and end that here. But y'all, I am Ori Marie, Divine Intuitive. And thank you for listening. Bye.